All right. Karla.
Yes.
Karla, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I was actually born in Oakland, California. My mom moved to Texas. That's where a lot of her family was from. But when I was about 2 years old, I was taken from my mom and placed with my grandparents for a short time. And eventually, one of my aunts legally got guardianship of me. So I kind of grew up in Texas, and I had a really good life there for a while. I lived with my aunt from the time I was 4 until I was about 11 years old. Life was great. I had structure, I had rules and everything that a child needs. But I always felt like a burden to my aunt, and I never really got the affection and love that a kid needs. I was never really hugged or kissed or any of that kind of thing. So, and she would always remind me about how much money she had to spend on me because my mom wasn't able to care for me. So one day my aunt found a pack of cigarettes that I had stole from her in my bedroom, and I wasn't even smoking them. I was actually trying to be the cool girl at 11 years old, giving them to the lady down the street. She was like 16. I was trying to make friends. But my aunt caught me, and instead of punishment, her form of punishment was me packing a backpack full of clothes, and she dropped me off at my mom's front door. My mom at the time had remarried, and she was in active addiction. Both of them were. So I went from having nice name brand clothes and shoes, eating 3 square meals a day, to wondering if I was going to eat at all. My mom and my stepdad would lock themselves in their room and smoke crack and fight. They were very physical with each other. I got curious one night of what all this yelling and screaming was about, and I went and looked up underneath their door to kind of see what was going on. And what I seen kind of changed my life. So I ran away for the first time at 11. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I just kind of hung out in the neighborhood. This older lady that I knew, she was in her 30s. She came and sat with me down at this little creek where I was hanging out, and I smoked weed for the first time. She became a good, I guess you could say, friend, to the point that I called her mom number 2. And eventually she introduced me to more drugs. And one night at a party when I was 12, she gave me some drugs, and I woke up in a bed with a man, and I later found out that she sold my virginity. So after that, she got me addicted at 12 to crack, and she would have me run away from home and sell me to her drug dealers. I spent a lot of nights on the streets of Texas with this woman, and I eventually got away from her because her 16-year-old daughter had kind of talked to me about how her mom had sold her since she was a little girl. And that really wasn't even enough for me to leave. It wasn't until I was very well known runaway by the police at that time. They knew me by name, and they picked me up one night in Texas City, and they asked me about this man that was in the car. And it turns out that the man that she had picked up that was in the car with us had just gotten out of prison for raping and killing a girl about my age and dropped her body off by the water, by the beach. And that's where we were actually heading. So I left her, not, I didn't interact with her anymore, but she taught me something on the streets, that nothing in life is free, especially for a runaway kid. Every single meal, every single night to sleep in a bed, it cost me something. I remember giving a man a blowjob in the back of his car just so I could get a chicken nugget Happy Meal. I got in a lot of trouble with the police. I've been arrested probably 15 times at least by the age 13. And stopped going to school. I would actually go to school and tell all my friends everything that I was doing because I thought it was normal. And I quickly turned into the outcast. I was called all the names in the book, the slut, the whore, everything. So I felt all alone, and I stopped going to school. So I lived on the streets, trading my body for the things that I needed, until I was 14 and I found out I was pregnant. My aunt told me that I could come back home and live with her and live the happily ever after if I would just have an abortion. And something in me just told me that I couldn't do that. So I kept my son. I told a man that I had recently been with, he was probably almost 30, that I was pregnant with his child. And the only reason I told him that is because I knew he had his own car and his own house. And I thought that would be a safe place for me to have a baby, and raise my family. But that turned into a very disturbing experience. If I did not cook or clean or sexually please this man multiple times a day, I was threatened to be kicked out. And so I endured that for about 4 years until one day I came home from work because he wouldn't work. I came home from work and my son was telling me that his butt hurt. So I suspected that this man was sexually abusing my son while I was at work. And I decided to leave that day. I had all of our stuff packed. He wasn't there, and I got my son to my friend's house. And as I was getting the last little bit of my stuff, he showed up, and he told me right before trying to drown me in the bathtub that if he couldn't have me, nobody could. I barely got away from him, and in this ugly process of leaving, I actually met my husband, the man I'm married to now. He became my son's dad, in a sense, and we didn't live the best life. Back then my husband sold drugs, so he had money to take care of us, but it wasn't the lifestyle that we wanted. So we decided at some point to move to Texas to be closer to my mom. He is a very big family-oriented man, and he wanted me to have some kind of relationship with my mom. My mom had moved away from Houston area and got sober, so he wanted us to have some kind of relationship. So we moved close to my mom. Well, I had a lot of unresolved trauma from my childhood, obviously, and I had to have an emergency surgery one year to get my appendix taken out, and I got heavily addicted to pain pills. And with the pain pills and the trauma, I did the best thing that I knew how to do. I ran. I ran away from my husband. I ran away from my family. I left my kids behind. I had already had 2 more kids with my husband. My 2 younger kids were very small. My oldest was probably about 10, maybe a little older. And I ran away from home. I got into a lot of different scenes. I started doing rap music videos and things like that. You know, I was the white girl with the guns and the tattoos and everything in the music videos, until one night I did a music video for a rapper well known in Baton Rouge, and he told me he was going to pay me a certain amount of money. And after the music video was done, him and 3 of his friends got into my car and told me to drive back to my place, that he was going to give me the money there. And we get back to my house, and well, it wasn't even a house. I was renting a room. We got back to my place, and they basically all wanted to have sex with me. So I'm a survival person, always have been because of my past. So I always kept my key fob to my car in my bra, and I always kept my wallet tucked into the key, the glove box in my car. So I told the guys, okay, I'm going to go freshen up in the bathroom. Well, I went to the bathroom and walked straight back out the back door. And whenever I took off in my car, I start getting all these phone calls telling me, you know, bitch, you better come back. All my shit's in your car. And sure enough, I pulled over at a Walmart, and there were guns, drugs, jewelry, money, everything was in my car. So I basically jacked all of these rappers for all of their stuff on the day of their big video shoot. So I was scared to go back to my house. I was scared to go back around my kids. I knew somebody that I thought was going to help me, and he kind of gave me a place to hide out for a little bit, but that wasn't really enough. So one day he tells me, Karla, I know somebody that can help you out of this situation. So he drives me to an apartment complex, and I met a man, and I didn't know his real name. His name to me was Fat. And at first it was a romantic relationship, or so I thought. He spent a lot of money on me. He would take me places that I always wanted to go as a kid. He doted on me. He treated me like a queen. One day he tells me, I want to show you what I really do for money. And so he made me drive to this really rundown hotel, and this girl walked out, and she had this long red wig on. She was beautiful, but you could tell she was very young. And as soon as she got in the car, his demeanor completely changed. He tells me an address to put in my GPS and told me to drive, and that I wasn't allowed to talk. So I did what I was told. We get to the place, the girl gets out, goes in, comes back later, gives him money. He would then give me a piece of the money, I guess for gas, and we were using my car. And this went on for about a week or 2. Well, one night we drove a pretty good distance to go take her somewhere to, she came out pretty fast, and she didn't have any money to give him. So you could tell he was really angry, and he told me to drive to a certain spot in Louisiana close to the swamps, and told me to pull over and park. And he drug her out of my car, and I watched in the rearview mirror as he beat her. He made me leave her there on the side of the road. And I don't know what happened to her. That's kind of why I do my hair red now. So he He made me drive to a hotel in Baton Rouge, and he was completely different. The love and everything that I had once saw, the affection and everything that I was craving so much, that wasn't there anymore. He placed an ad on Backpage.com, and he used a girl's picture off of a porn site, and he told me that I just had to do it just that one time until he found another girl. The first time he drove me to a casino, and there was my first client. When I got back into the car, he gave me a quota and told me if I did not meet that quota every single day, that there was punishment. I didn't know what that punishment looked like until I found out for myself. He took me from Baton Rouge to Texas to Colorado, and we stopped at every single city in between. My quota was $1,500 a day, and if I did not meet that, then I was severely sexually abused, sodomized, and beaten. And he would put things on these ads, things that I did not want to do, things that I would never do with anybody as punishment. One day, we were in Colorado, and that was the moment that I realized that I needed to get away. Something happened. I wanted to always go see the mountains, so that's why we went to Colorado. But at the top of Pikes Peak, there was this lady that offered to take a picture of us together. And his response was actually what made it click in my mind for me that he really didn't love me. He told this woman, "I don't take pictures with hoes." And that crushed me. And I knew in that moment that I needed to leave, that I needed to get away. So when we drove back to Houston, we were at a hotel, and I waited for the right time. He just happened to leave my keys laying on the dresser, and he went to check on one of the other girls that was with us. And I grabbed my keys, and in these heels right here, I ran down 3 flights of stairs and jumped in my car, and I took off. I drove as far as I possibly could because at this time I was addicted to methamphetamine. I weighed less than 100 pounds, and I had been beaten so badly that my rib cage was completely crushed on this side. I had bruises all over my body from trying to protect myself from all of his blows of being punished. So I drove as far as I could. And I called my husband, and I told my husband where I was at and what was going on. And in the middle of me telling my husband where I was at and what I was doing, I got messages from this man telling me that if I didn't come back, he was going to take my daughter, who was 5 years old at the time, and he was going to do the same thing to her. So I told my husband goodbye, that I was going back to protect our daughter because I didn't know any other way to. I had a warrant out for my arrest, so there was no calling the cops. I didn't want to go to jail. I had been before, and to me that was like worse than what I was going through, even though it sounds, looking back, I'm like, why didn't I just call the cops? But that was where my mind was at. So I told my husband, no matter what, you protect my daughter. And this man started sending me pictures of where my daughter got on and off the bus, which scared me because that showed me that he had some kind of connections, like we weren't even in that town. And so I went back. My quota went up to $2,500 a day. I was not allowed to eat at all, no matter how much money I made him. he constantly fed me drugs so that I would not go to sleep and constantly work. So my husband did the smartest thing he could have done, and he called the police. And DPS started a case and tried to find me of where I was at, where my location was at. They could tell from my text messages and our conversation that I was not a willing participant. So I was in a hotel in College Station, and he had already taken everything of value from me, my wedding ring, my jewelry, anything of value. But for some reason, this cross that I wear every single day that I never take off, I found this in my stuff while I was in the bathtub. I used to take really, really hot baths because that was the only thing that would soothe my body from all the broken bones and bruising and everything. So I was digging through my stuff while I was in the bathtub, and I found this cross, and it has the Lord's Prayer etched into it. And I'd actually bought this for my husband years ago as an anniversary present. So how it got there, I cannot explain, but it was there. And in that moment, I remembered a prayer that I told my daughter one night when she had a nightmare. I put this necklace around her, and I told her, not even really knowing or having a relationship with God, but I told her, I said, baby, when God is with you, no evil can come against you. So in that moment, in the bathtub, I remembered what I told my daughter. And I remember looking up at the ceiling and just saying, I can't do this anymore. A few days after that happened, I was walking out of the same hotel, and DPS just rushed me. And I remember dropping all of my stuff on the ground because he was about to move us to another location. I dropped everything and just collapsed on the floor, and I told DPS, I said, you guys just saved my life. They took me to the hospital. They determined I had multiple broken ribs. They don't see how I was still alive because the bones were so close to puncturing all of my major organs. I had STDs. I was extremely traumatized to the point that I wouldn't even look anybody in the face. All I could do is cry and shake like a leaf. I couldn't function. So they took me to the hospital and did all that. They found a place for me to stay. My husband came and got me, and I went to my mom's house, which was another trigger. So whenever I got to my mom's house, everybody, my stepdad was the one that triggered me, and I just felt this sudden urge that I needed to leave. And so my husband heard me planning my great escape, and he called the cops on me again and told the cops, hey, she has a warrant. You need to come and get her. Back then, there was no programs. There was no safe place for me to go. This is back in 2016, so a lot of this wasn't even really talked about or known. So I went to prison for 7 months because I didn't pay probation fines. They kept me in solitary confinement for 3 weeks because of my injuries and things, and also because all I could do was cry and shake and scream and holler. So whenever I got out of prison, I went home to be with my husband and my kids, but I was far from okay. So on October 4th of 2017, I attempted suicide. I tried to take my own life, and instead
Instead, I don't know. I can't even explain what happened. I took a whole bottle of anxiety pills, and I was waiting for them to kick in. And a friend that I had met with victim services, advocacy, all this stuff, she had called me right after I took all the pills. A normal person probably would have called 911 and got my stomach pumped and, all of these things, but she just started praying over the phone with me. And I can't really explain what happened, but I ended up crying puddles into the carpet of my bedroom floor, and I rededicated my life to God that day. And I never felt the effects of the pills. And I don't know how to explain that. A lot of people are like, yeah, right, but it happened. So I tell everybody October 4th of 2017 was the day that I tried to throw in the towel, and God threw it back in my face and said, no, ma'am, you've got some work to do. So the very next day, I left my house by myself for the very first time in 7 months. I got a job working at a restaurant I used to work at, and I started from there. About a month after that, I was asked to share my testimony for the very first time at a human trafficking conference. I didn't even know what human trafficking meant at that point. And about the same time, the investigator of the case that recovered me called me and told me that that's what they were charging this guy with, was trafficking in persons charges. And I got angry. I was like, you're charging him for taking me across a state line without my permission? He's like, Karla, do you know what trafficking really means? I didn't. So that started my journey of educating myself of trauma, trafficking, the whole 9 yards.
Explain to the audience and to me what because human trafficking is a very vague term, and it can mean, no one really understands what it means. Tell us what it means.
In very layman's terms, it looks like forced prostitution.
Does that include like the brainwashing?
So there is a lot of force, fraud, and coercion that goes into trafficking. A lot of times that looks like a whole lot of manipulation. A lot of women that I've worked with, there's 3 common factors: early childhood abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse, and criminal charges. There's a vulnerable population, especially with like foster kids and stuff. Foster kids are extremely vulnerable. Runaways are extremely vulnerable because they need something. And sometimes, like I said, as a kid, nothing in life is free, especially for a runaway kid or somebody living on the street. So you have to pay with something, and if you don't have money, what do you use? Your body. And a lot of times, there's somebody that is forcing you or manipulating you into thinking that you're making these choices on your own. And so that's where that brainwashing part comes in, and they start to condition you in different ways by breaking you down to literally nothing and then building you up to the person that they want you to be.
Which is the brainwashing.
That's the brainwashing part. Yeah. So I started educating myself on what all of the ins and outs of what this looks like and how it happens, why it happens, all the things. And once I had a clear understanding of what that was, it made a lot more sense, not just of my current situation, but what happened to me as a child as well. So that kind of started my journey into what I work and do now. So today, my oldest son is a student at Georgetown University. He graduated from LSU last year, so that would have been the one I would have aborted. We have a working relationship. We're still working on a lot of things. You have to understand, I was 15 when I had him, so, we grew up together in a lot of aspects, and he's seen a lot of this trauma firsthand, not to mention the trauma he experienced, as a kid. So he's very successful in my book anyways, very proud mom moment. By this time, my trafficker was on the run. He actually made the top 10 Texas Most Wanted list before he was apprehended in Kentucky. And he is now serving 2 30-year prison sentences for what happened to me. So I now I've helped build a ministry from the ground up. That also helps trafficking survivors. We have 2 homes that we're about to open the second one that holds 12 beds each. I'm starting a new project for another demographic of vulnerable women that have been through similar situations, that are working through CPS, trying to get their own children back. But on top of that, I also am part of the Human Trafficking Survivor Leader Council for the Office of the Governor of the State of Texas. I am a survivor consultant for Homeland Security. I have assisted them in the creation of majority of their training videos to do with human trafficking. I've done classes with law enforcement all over Texas. I regularly do classes with DPS right alongside the same investigator that recovered me, which is really cool because not many people can say that. We've partnered together and we provide trauma-informed interviewing training to all new DPS agents in Texas so that they are equipped with the right tools in order to interview these women. Because for me, whenever it was time to talk about what happened at the hospital, it was him or me. They found drugs in my purse. I had a warrant out for my arrest. I could have gone away for a really long time. And I didn't realize what was going on was not my fault. And I think that was the biggest thing. A lot of people that are in these situations, they think that they're making these choices on their own. They think that they're doing this by choice. They're not. It's because they are in a vulnerable situation and they need help in order to get out of that. And the people that end up helping them are the exact ones that are preying on them and taking advantage of them, manipulating them, and making money off of them ultimately.
And you're doing better now.
I am. So I live at home. I live at home with my husband. My husband was gracious enough to accept me back. We've worked through a whole hell of a lot and still working through it. I think trauma is a never-ending process. There's always something that comes up. My daughter is now 13. She's in jazz. She's in theater. She's never had to experience any of the trauma that I've had to go through, which has been my ultimate goal in life. My son is at home also. He's football, this, and all the sports and everything. They're doing so good in school.
That's great.
And my biggest accomplishment for me is that I've now become a woman that would have protected me as a child.
It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
How long ago was this going on? It wasn't.
2016 is when I was recovered.
So it wasn't that long ago.
I have accomplished a lot in 7-8 years.
What would you say is the most important thing you've learned from all of this?
To take care of myself before I can take care of somebody else. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. Not too long ago, I went through some really scary health issues myself, because just like doctors and just like other people that are so passionate about helping people, they will help other people to the point where they're running themselves into the ground. And something that I've struggled with working for a ministry is the fact that you don't make a lot of money. So I've still had to struggle financially all these years. And I thought in my head, well, the more I work, maybe they'll pay me more, that kind of mentality, because that's what I was taught. The more I work, the more I make, right? I had to break that thought.
Tell me what it's like now that you're on the other side, what it's like to be in that brainwashed state where you're doing all these crazy things, working so hard, risking your life to support this guy.
I did it because I thought he loved me. And because I was so deprived of love as a child, I was to the point where I would do literally anything just to be loved, just to be held, just to be told that everything's going to be okay. Somebody that would be there for me no matter what. And I think that's the hardest thing for some of these people to understand. Thank you. You know, I've worked with hundreds of victims, children and adults, at this point. And I think that that's the common reason is love. We're looking for love.
Did you have a father?
I don't know my real dad.
Yeah, there you go.
And my mom was a drug addict majority of my life. My aunt, she was an amazing woman, but she still didn't show me the love that I really needed. And for her to just, instead of punish me for finding cigarettes in my stuff, her result was, let me go drop you off at your mom's house so you can really know what it feels like to be poor. That was her words to me as she dropped me off on the front doorstep. So I felt at that point, 11, 12 years old, that nobody loved me. And the woman down the street, she showed me just that little bit of love and made me believe that sex equals love. That if a man was willing to pay me and have sex with me, that was love. So I grew up with this unrealistic belief of what love looked like. And I'm still learning to this day what real love looks like. I mean, my husband is the greatest man, but none of us are perfect, you know. And sometimes he doesn't understand when I have anxiety or episodes and things. And, you know, sometimes he wants to tell me, Karla, you just need to get over it. It's been so many years. And I'm like, how the fuck am I supposed to get over a lifetime of trauma? It's a process. And it's a process that sometimes we as survivors feel like throwing in that towel. We feel like giving up. But a lot of times it's because we're not taking care of ourselves properly. Mentally, emotionally, physically, all of that has to be a part of our healing. Because when it's not, then we end up in places like I was recently with extreme health problems, anxiety. They wanted to hospitalize me just a few weeks ago because I was just at the end of my rope, struggling financially, trying to figure this out. And it really is hard whenever your name gets out there like mine has because of all the work that I've done in the public in Texas. So I have girls calling me every day, all hours of the night, needing help, needing rescue, needing this, needing money just to go see their kids or whatever the case is. And I go broke trying to help these people because I know how it feels like to be in those shoes. And I never want somebody to feel the way that I felt. And so that's why I'm passionate about the work that I do. But I also have to have boundaries, healthy boundaries. That's something I've had to learn because without that, I'd be right back at square one.
All right. Karla, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're doing better now.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. even though Soft White Underbelly consists of a lot of videos, it's really still a photography project to me. And if you appreciate the photography, sometimes it's difficult to enjoy it when it's scrolling down the screen, which is the only option I had in this horizontal format on YouTube. So last year we came out with the first Soft White Underbelly book, which is a collection of the best portraits from the thousands of interviews I've done. Each portrait in this book is accompanied by an interesting quote from the person's interview.
Oh my God.
There's more.
Wow. These aren't as bad as I thought. I look like a witch.
The book includes multi-page spreads of both Rebecca and the Whitaker family. I will not be reprinting this book when it sells out, so once it's gone for good. You can order yours at softwhiteunderbelly.org. $125, $150 for a signed copy. And thank you for watching.